No, that's good stuff. Now going back to the gaming announcement side of things, I want to touch on this briefly because I don't want to be a pessimist. I don't want to be a downer, but I feel like this was really pretty kind of an embarrassing showing for Sony this year.
Mm.
They had that big Sony showcase, and I think myself and the regular cast we were pretty amped about it when we kind of came out of it. And I think that was just sort of yes, there's the things are on there's things to talk about. There are games getting announced and stuff, but in hindsight, we're like, oh, that was a lot of stuff that's also, it's cross-platform. There was a very small first-party showing in that particular showcase. There was a big hardware reveal for the Project Q, which feels like it's not quite there yet, and I don't know if there is a place anyone wants to go. Naughty Dog's big summer announcement is that the multiplayer Last of Us is they're simultaneously getting back to work on it, but also work like devoting less. It's just not great. The PlayStation VR, which apparently is selling better than the previous iteration, comparatively speaking, hasn't gotten really any first party like reveals. Like they had their big showcase, which would be a good place to maybe be like, hey, here's Astrobot's divorce cruise or whatever. I don't know what his next adventure is, but something big like that. And it was a bunch of third party games for PS, which is cool and everything. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, how is Sony supporting its own hardware? That's kind of wild. Obviously we have the big, huge. I think the biggest PSVR 2 thing on the way is RE4 VR. Like that's the biggest sort of AAA known quantity. And even that is like we got a showing for that just recently at Capcom's thing, and it was like the same footage. And it's like, so even when we're getting like third party support on a third party stream, it's like kind of lackluster. And then Sony's like dropping announcements here and there on the blog. They're basically burying them. They announced a couple of new PSVR games, but it's like, why didn't you just take the PSVR stuff out of that showcase and give it its own little showcase or state of play or whatever? We got our first look at Destiny's Bungie's first new project under Sony, and it's cross-platform, which is great for everybody. But at the same time, I think it's kind of I don't know, and it was a CG trailer. Like it was sort of this kind of like lackluster announcement. But the sort of punchline to all this though is that Sony's like in first place console sales wise. So maybe that's the way to go about it. Like, am I crazy here? What did you all think of this? Of sort of how Sony's been showcasing everything this year? Khalif, I want to hear your thoughts.
I was, and it's hard because it's like if you have to do the hindsight version of it, right? It's like having seen something that was really well produced in the Xbox showcase that really just nailed all the things that were pacing, content, all of those things. It makes you go back and look at that Sony showcase and say, man, the ball was dropped here. Like there was a space to really like do the 360 dunk on your competition, and they didn't do it because they went first. And it feels like that ability to kind of go first and not have everything kind of be in that space exactly when you needed it to be there, both from a we're ready to show it and we're ready to talk about it conversation, just put them in a really weird spot. Like there were some interesting, games that got shown within that showcase, like Neva and a bunch of other games.
Foam Stars.
But
I love Foam
Stars.
Stars. Yeah.
Game of the year, Foam Stars.
Game of the year. But it feels like the thing that Sony does really, really well from a marketing perspective. It feels like they have missed a couple of beats here and there about what is a player who's excited in your ecosystem want to know about. They want to know about dates. They want to know about gameplay. They want to know about when they can touch a thing and when they're going to be able to see something new that's going to really showcase the power of the machine that they wind up purchasing. And games like Teardown, as much as I love them and they're really cool, that's not the game that I want to see to be the thing that's going to get me to talk about, hey, I'm going to be able to play this with my friends at X date and say, hey, we're going to squad up and do this or what. They just didn't nail that part of the equation and the conversation. And I think the games that we know we're going to do really, really well, we know they're going to do well. Final Fantasy, we know is going to be in that conversation in a big way. But the other stuff that they could have pulled out of their bag, or that one more thing, the one more thing was a device that no one is going to buy.
Yeah, the one more thing was 15 minutes of Spider-Man, which looks awesome. But then we were all like, release date, and it was like fall, and we're like, okay, and then they saved that for Keely's thing, which just, I don't know, that was obviously someone drove
have a little bone truck, Keely. Here you go.
Yeah.
Even that though, right, is like we also know that like Insomniac doesn't miss. So like that's not a surprise for anyone who's in the PlayStation ecosystem. They already knew that game was coming, and we all know that game is going to be good. It's going to the question they could have answered there is like, does this game do something again different on the hardware that is something that you haven't seen before? And if you look at that game, The answer is, for me at least, not really. Like, I think it looks fantastic. It's going to have that sparkle and that polish that we already know Insomniac puts on their games, but there wasn't anything within even that sequence that I was like, holy crap, this is the reason why I have purchased this machine. And this is the thing that it's doing from an OS perspective, from a gameplay perspective, from a new DualSense Elite controller perspective. Like, there are so many things that are in that PlayStation ecosystem that I think is really important that they could be showing across PlayStation VR and the hardware. We're just not seeing that yet, and I don't know if that's a problem with the if that's a problem with the games or if that's a problem with things just not being ready yet, right? So we'll see. I think there's going to be a part of that conversation that we really need to dig into.
Kat, what do you think about Sony's presence this summer?
I think people need to chill the heck out about this. Seriously. I mean, if I'm looking at the upcoming schedule for the PlayStation 5, we've got Spider-Man coming out in September, and that's obviously going to sell a zillion units. And there's going to be all of the major third-party tentpoles. People are going to be playing their FIFAs and their Call of Duties. They haven't shown Call of Duty really, but we know that we're basically getting another Modern Warfare. And
could have shown it on
looking
Sony.
beyond
I'm just
that,
saying, maybe they could have shown that off. That would have been a cool reveal. I don't really care about Call of Duty.
I think that maybe they're okay. I'll get to the parts that I think Sony probably is causing a little bit of alarm in a second. Like looking ahead, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That's a pretty solid exclusive coming up early next year. Like the cadence of games coming to PlayStation 5 is pretty solid. Where I would worry as a PlayStation fan is that there was a lot of games as a service in this particular showcase. From Jade Raymond's game that was shown at the very beginning, which frankly I did not think looked very good, to Marathon, which is a huge bummer that one of the best single player FPSs ever is being turned into a games of service. That's too bad. And I think that there was a decent number of people who were like, well, show me a new single player prestige game from a Sony first party studio that I can be excited about. And frankly, even a thing like Ghost of Tsushima 2, I think would have gotten people going, okay, yeah. And like, I get it that people are going, hey, like, it's been a while since we've had a showcase and we want to see what's going to be happening into the next year and beyond. Get me excited about owning this thing because frankly, this generation hasn't been much so far. But I have to say, like, the doomsaying about Sony going into the next year, the PS5 is, frankly, it's doing incredibly. And in the short term, the games are there. Talk to me next spring.
Exactly. Like they're doing fine. They're doing great. So there's not really any reason to like criticize this. But as you know, as someone who has to make a PlayStation show every week, it is a little frustrating that when like if you give someone a really crappy gift that's obviously phoned in, it's worse than no gift at all. Like that's kind of what the showcase. It's like, hey man, I got you half a sleeve of Oreos for your birthday. You're like, thanks. I think
wow.
like.
Here are these used socks.
I got you a 5-pack of Mike's Hard Lemonade. I drank one on the way over. You're like, all right.
Hey, I'm a Nintendo fan. I know about software gaps. I just have to say.
Yeah.
Can I jump in on that last point that Kat had really quick about the games of service part? And I agree with you, Kat. I think the Sony's doing well in terms of what the expectations are, what we're going to get delivered from that conversation. I think the thing that Sony fans and every fan at this point in the gaming space is really thinking about is we do have a deluge of games that are dropping all the time. And I feel like the conversations between what is a game of service and that also now just being automatically kind of given a negative tone from a lot of players, which I think is a education moment for the gaming industry to try to figure out good ways to talk about games of services as a benefit for players and then showcase them and prove that out, which I think is still in the mix. But I do think that like for Sony, there were some missed potential opportunities there. Like, could we get an update on Wolverine? Could we get an update on some other games that we knew were in the ecosystem? Because we know stuff is going to drop end of this year, beginning of next, and middle of next year. I think the things that people are still trying to figure out for themselves is to say, past all those things that we already know are going to be known entities, we still do want that little bit of icing on the cake to figure out, like, what's the future of the platform going to look like in a way? Because I don't think Sony has done that. It hasn't really broached that conversation well yet. There's a lot of pieces to that puzzle that they've dropped with VR, and I'm excited that they're continuing to do VR. And they continue to put out interesting hardware, both on the accessibility space and on the controller space with DualSense. But I do still think that there's a conversation there that is still to be had from the PlayStation platform that's like, consistently, what are you going to get? Where are the places that's going to be? There's a layer of that conversation that's still in that mix of like, what does PlayStation Plus bring to all of this? And how do we actually market this in a way that's compelling and doesn't feel like it's kind of, just thrown out there? there's a lot of still weird, unspoken and unfigured out kind of layers to that ecosystem that I think would be great to have clarification on from the platform. That's
Yeah, a
the last
little
part.
communication would be nice. Ben, are we being too pessimistic? Am I being too pessimistic? What do you think?
No, I think, look, it feels like to me this was a presentation written by an algorithm to be the most kind of functional presentation to show you just enough games, just enough variations of different genres of games so that it kind of appeals to everyone. I think the biggest confusions are around the PSVR 2 and all the VR games that they showcased all looked very similar. You know, everyone has a gun in their hand. There's no VR experience where nobody's holding a gun, which is, you know, I will take a bow and arrow. Give me another Horizon Call of the Mountain. And then the hardware reveal, which again, last time I was on Beyond, I went pretty hard on Project Q for being the weirdest device for an audience that doesn't exist. Why even reveal it? I don't know what the thinking was behind that. Is it just like, just throw it out and see if anybody shows any interest, and then we'll kind of tweak it to become what people want? If you want a Steam Deck competitor, or if that's what you're going for, you know, if that's what you want to be, or if you just want a little device that people carry around their home and take to bed, all right, that's fine.
It's more like a backbone competitor. I think.
Yeah, but they also make stuff for that too. Like, you can get the PlayStation controllers for the backbone as well. Like, I don't know. It was just bizarre, but I don't think they needed to do anymore. And I know there were rumors that came out, you know, that there are bigger games that they have in their arsenal that they were ready to show that they just chose not to, and they are rumors. But these presentations, this isn't an E3 presentation. You don't have to fly people out. There's no putting on stage. You have to build the presentation itself. But the millions of dollars it costs to like put on an E3 presentation, they could do another one later in the year. I know I'm optimistic. I said last time I was on, Christmas is when you sell consoles. So if you hit everybody at the end of the year with, oh, you just played Spider-Man, have you heard of all these other games we've got coming down? Merry Christmas to all.
I mean, I'd accept like a big, huge showcase in September. And I think they've done stuff like that before. I feel like we were having these same conversations leading into the launch of the PS5. We're like, can we see it? Where is it? I want to see it. How big is it? And the answer is it's huge. And we eventually saw it. And I think that was like later in the summer kind of thing. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for, you know, third-party games that have a kind of an association with, you know, with the PlayStation, you know, ecosystem, family, whatever. And it's, I don't know. We got our big Final Fantasy reveal at the end of Jeff Keighley's thing, and you know, business is business. But it was, I don't know. I feel like that could have been a good place to put that.
Can I just say that yes, we all cover this for a living, and it's good. You know, when we have something to get excited about and talk about. But the way that the hype engine has become like everything, where people are just like, yeah, these games are coming out, but what's next? I need to know what's coming up next, so that I can look forward to what's coming out in 2024 and 2025. I just want to point out that PlayStation fans are eating right now. Friggin' Diablo 4, Final Fantasy 16, and Street Fighter 6 are coming out right now. And you go, well, so one of those is a third-party exclusive and the others are multi-plat. Those are all amazing games that you can play.
Don't
Just
tell
play
me
them,
where
people.
I can and can't move my goalposts. I want to move them over there where it's easier to kick the goals. Come on.
Come on. There are lots of games out right now.
No, you're 100% right. Like it is definitely like looking a gift horse in the mouth. I guess it's just sort of weird because everyone's super excited about everything coming out of, you know, like Xbox had a really cool show, and it honestly felt like they understand that there are people who care about that brand. And you know, Devolver did the same thing. And you know, Summer Game Fest was a little bit weird. Capcom thing was all over the place. Ubisoft did a sea shanty. They're not all perfect, but I feel
Xbox
like, you know,
needed a home run. They did.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no,
they badly needed a home run. PlayStation is is doing fine. Like God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring were two of the biggest games of last year, and they're in many ways associated with PlayStation.
You know, you're totally right. Maybe we do love PlayStation enough that it can give us half a sleeve of Oreos for our birthday, and we won't be mad about it. You know, I guess we'll take it.